"We never imagined it would come to this." Those words did not come from a disappointed fan. They did not come from a frustrated journalist. They came from inside a boardroom. From a man in a suit holding a contract worth billions of yen. A man who had built his entire summer marketing campaign around one name. One face. One player. And now that player would not be there. Shohei Ohtani would not play in the All-Star game. When the announcement came, it did not arrive like a thunderclap. It arrived quietly, the way devastating news sometimes does. A brief statement. A medical update. A carefully worded explanation. But behind the silence of that statement, an entire industry began to shake. 15 billion yen. That is the number that started circulating within hours. Not a fabricated figure. Not a rumor passed between fans on social media. It was the estimated sum of sponsorship exposure, advertisement campaigns, merchandise projections, and broadcast deals that had been structured, in whole or in part, around the assumption that Shohei Ohtani would stand in that all-star stadium and swing a bat in front of the world. And now he wouldn't. To understand what this moment truly meant, you have to go back further than this week. You have to go back to the moment when the sponsors signed. It was not a coincidence that so many companies had built their summer campaigns around the All-Star Game specifically. The All-Star Game is not just a mid-season exhibition. In a year when Ohtani had already returned to pitching, when he had already stood on a major league mound for the first time in over a year and thrown 5 shutout innings against one of the best offenses in baseball, the All-Star stage was supposed to be something different. It was supposed to be the coronation. The moment when the world, not just baseball fans, would stop and watch. Sponsors understood that. They had planned for it. Some had paid for it in advance. One executive, speaking to a media outlet but declining to be named, put it plainly. His company had timed their entire seasonal campaign to peak during All-Star Week. Every advertisement, every promotional event, every social post had been calibrated to ride the wave of attention that Ohtani's presence would create. When the news broke, he said he sat in his office for a long time without speaking to anyone. "We never imagined," he finally said, "that it would come to this." The phrase became a kind of quiet refrain in the days that followed. Variations of it appeared in corporate communications, in emergency meetings, in hushed conversations between brand managers who suddenly found themselves restructuring campaigns that had taken months to build. The scale of the problem was not immediately visible to the outside world. The machine of modern sports sponsorship operates largely out of public view. Brands do not announce what they paid. Contracts do not get published. But the people inside that machine knew exactly what they were looking at. 15 billion yen does not vanish overnight. Some of it is recoverable. Some campaigns can be redirected. Some broadcast slots can be repackaged. But a significant portion of it, the portion tied specifically to Ohtani's image, to his performance on that stage, to the moment of him stepping into the batter's box under all-star lights, that portion simply disappears. It cannot be replaced by another player. It cannot be rescheduled. The moment was the product, and the moment would not happen. That is the part that is difficult to explain to someone who has never sat inside a sponsorship negotiation. When you sign a deal around a player like Ohtani, you are not simply paying for logo placement. You are paying for a specific kind of attention. The kind that stops people scrolling. The kind that makes someone in Tokyo or Osaka or Kobe look up from whatever they are doing and watch. That attention is not transferable. Inside the Dodgers organization, the decision was made with a different kind of calculus entirely. Ohtani had returned to pitching in May. He had done it on a stage that demanded everything of him, a series-deciding game against the Padres, with the division implications sitting clearly in the background. He had thrown 88 pitches over 5 innings. He had batted leadoff. He had hit a first-pitch home run before the Dodgers' starting pitcher had even thrown a single pitch. And then, with the bases loaded and Fernando Tatis Jr. at the plate and the entire game hanging in the balance, he had thrown a sweeper on the first pitch and induced a double play. He had roared on the mound. He had pumped his fist. But what the cameras didn't show, what the crowd's noise covered, was the conversation happening inside the training staff's evaluation in the days and weeks that followed. Every inning Ohtani throws as a pitcher is an inning that carries weight. Not just physical weight. Strategic weight. The kind of weight that accumulates slowly and makes itself known at the worst possible time if you are not paying attention. The medical staff paid attention. When the decision was made to keep Ohtani out of the All-Star game, it was not made carelessly. It was not made because someone failed to understand what was at stake commercially. Everyone inside the Dodgers front office understood. They had sat in those same meetings. They had seen those same projections. They knew what 15 billion yen looked like as a number and what it meant as a reality. The decision was made because the long game mattered more than the mid-season stage. Dave Roberts, when asked about it, did not dress the answer in sentiment. His voice was measured. His words were short. He said the organization had to be responsible. He said there was a difference between what people wanted to see and what was right for the player and the team. He said October was the target, and everything between now and October had to be judged against that target. He paused after that. Then he added something quietly. He said Ohtani understood. He said the conversation had been direct and that there had been no argument. Across the room, or rather, in an entirely different city and an entirely different kind of room, a brand manager stared at a printed campaign schedule and drew a line through the second week of July. The work of restructuring had already begun. Some sponsors pivoted quickly, redirecting the Ohtani-adjacent content toward his earlier performance against the Padres, toward archive footage, toward the narrative of his return to pitching rather than the specific spectacle of All-Star Night. It was a workable solution. It was not the same thing. A campaign built around a moment needs the moment. What the sponsors had purchased was not simply Ohtani's face. They had purchased the feeling of inevitability that surrounds him. The sense, which anyone who watched that game against the Padres could describe without needing to find the right words, that something is happening which does not happen anywhere else. That feeling cannot be recreated in a studio. It cannot be simulated in a commercial shoot. It lives inside the actual event, inside the actual at-bat, inside the actual mound visit where a pitching coach needs only 30 seconds and a few words to help a superstar find his release point again. That is what the sponsors were paying for. That is what would not happen this July. There is a larger story underneath the business story. It is a story about what Ohtani represents and why that representation is so commercially powerful and so commercially fragile at the same time. He is unprecedented. That word gets used carelessly in sports, but in his case it is simply accurate. There is no model for him. There is no previous player whose career trajectory the sponsors could study to understand how to structure their exposure, how to hedge their investments, how to plan for contingencies. When Babe Ruth missed games, it was a loss. When Ohtani misses the All-Star game, it is something different. It is the absence of an event category that exists only because he exists. The sponsors understood this when they signed. They understood that betting on Ohtani was different from betting on any other player because the ceiling of what he could provide was higher and the floor of uncertainty was also, by necessity, higher. You cannot have unprecedented upside without unprecedented risk. The two things come together. What they perhaps did not fully account for was how personal the risk would feel when it arrived. A projected number on a spreadsheet is one thing. An executive sitting alone in his office, not speaking to anyone, slowly understanding that the moment he planned around is gone, that is another thing entirely. He never imagined it would come to this. The All-Star game will happen without Shohei Ohtani. The stadium will fill. The players will take the field. The broadcast will run. Somewhere in the lineup of the evening, in the moments when the cameras sweep across the crowd and the announcers fill the silence with history and superlatives, there will be a version of this game that feels slightly smaller than it should. Not because the other players are not worthy. They are. Not because the game itself will lack drama. It may not. But because there are things in sports that exist only once, in the specific arrangement of this player, this stage, this moment. And when that arrangement is broken, the space it leaves behind has a shape. A very specific shape. The shape of everything that was planned and prepared and invested in and then quietly, carefully, necessarily set aside. 15 billion yen is a number. The shape it leaves is something harder to measure and something, once felt, that is very difficult to forget.